Okay, so we are on. Hello and welcome to the inaugural conversation of the Emergent Leadership Series. My name is Rukmini Iyer and I'm the founder of Exult Solutions. And we work at the intersection of consciousness, leadership, and peace building. And a lot of the work and the conversations that we've had, particularly in the last few weeks, have inspired this series as an attempt to sense into leadership that needs to emerge from the future. Leadership that is ecosystem oriented, conscious, and sustainable for all, including the planet and all its life forms. So there will be two types of conversations in the series. The divergence conversation, such as the one that we will have today, is about reaching out, gaining insights from leaders who are doing work on the ground. And there will be convergence conversations, which will be about reflecting within and co-sensing into what we have gathered from the divergence conversations. And these will flow into each other as we go along in the series. Today we have with us Srilakshmi Divakar, a colleague, a friend, and an inspirational leader in many ways. Sri is based in Bangalore in India, and her work spans being a mother, being a daughter, a public health professional. She's done a lot of work in health and nutrition, a volunteer for several noteworthy causes, and a consciousness worker, a facilitator. Those are some of the roles that I know she plays. And welcome, Sri, and thank you for joining us to kickstart this conversation. And also welcome to the 6 viewers that I see currently on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Sri.
Hi. So
yeah, thank you for joining us. And while there's a host of other things that you do, I'm particularly intrigued and inspired by the work that you're currently doing in the context of COVID-19 with farmers in your area. So would you want to tell us a little bit about that?
yes, so I stay in a village, and so farmers are somebody who are my neighbors, and I'm in touch with them on a personal level. So I get to see their lives from a very different lens, which is like more of it's more of a friendship that that I share. And so when these the first 2 weeks of lockdown, of course, was more of it created a lot of fear, and everyone were inside, and it was as though, yes, we had to go through this, and this is how it will be. But soon when it moved ahead, and more extensions started happening, so there was this sense of how much longer to stay inside. And that's when the holding capacities of different people that comes up, and these are the people who do not have that kind of long-term holding capacities. And also a whole lot of others' lives are dependent on them, in fact. And in fact, today is Labor Day, and I was just smiling to myself, what a day to start off this conversations, these set of conversations. Because though we define labor, and somehow the factory labor comes to our mind, maybe the construction labor, a whole lot of other, but farmers as laborers, even if they own the land, they're laboring in the land. Somehow that doesn't come to our picture, or that image doesn't hold there for us. And so there is a laboring at so many levels. So it's a process, between what is produced, or I wouldn't say produced, because then it seems like it is a final product that is there, but something that is grown, which takes a whole lot of processes that go into it. And then when the food reaches the table, I'm again not calling us the consumers, because I think even the grower is a consumer in that sense, that they eat the food too. So this whole process of growing and the food coming to us. And the food, again, I think when we say food, it's the cooked food that comes into our mind. But food is really all of that, that is part of our nutrition. And till that point, there is so much of labor that's gone into it, and a whole lot of it is invisible and hidden. And we seem to have lost track of what goes into, like, growing and then storing it and then bringing it and then perhaps reaching it to the people who need to eat. And
Mm.
that's where I saw these gaps, and there are so many people who suffer through that entire chain of events. But
Mm.
foremost, the farmers were sitting with it, and I started with a lot of small farmers who don't have that kind of like, produce where it is huge, but that's what they have grown. And they can't, if the transport first of all was not available, later it was expensive, so they can't really, and they're not used to take doing it. Somebody comes and picks up and goes, they only grow, so they don't even have a clue of now where to take all of this. So
Mm.
I said, okay, why not? And that was the time that when I was also like in touch with all my friends and neighbors who live in some of the gated communities around here. And they were saying that, we would rather eat something local because we know it's safe than something coming from somewhere. And also, a whole lot of things were not coming from somewhere because of the transport not being there. Then I said, okay, let me see if I can match this bit of people who need food and people who have grown food and keeping it, and then if it can work that way. That was one. And second was also, when I looked at the entire relief work, a lot of it is dry ration, and there are no fruits and vegetables into it. And so
Mhm.
here we are talking about, again, invisible hunger. It's not just about feeding a stomach, it's
Yeah.
about what is it that is going in there. And when I looked around, it is so many children, you know and so many women who are pregnant. So it meant that it was not just, see, where we went into categorizing who is needy, who is poor, who needs these essential stuff. But for me, all of us faced it in different ways. So it
Yeah.
was, in a sense, for me, a very leveling factor of each one of us face this invisible hunger, or lack of certain things. And so
Mm.
then I linked it to the relief work too. I said, I will link to the relief work only through the vegetables and fruits that are grown around this area. And I started going and meeting the farmers, and I said, whatever quantity you have, somebody gives me 2 kgs of banana, I was ready to take it, and
Mhm.
whatever. So put it together, because at the end of the day, every day I came with this myriad of things, all small quantities, but I had this
Mm.
one set of. So then I said, okay, every area that we go to, we give out this, and that is what each family requires. And the
Mm.
relief work is not just about one day you go and give it and come back. No, the next week that family has again run out of stuff.
Yeah.
So that means that this relationship, see, I'm not calling it um, we are helping or supporting. It's actually a relationship that
Mhm.
some of us have excess in whatever quantities. Like I said, it could be little more than what my family needs, but that can be
Mhm.
shared. And that also occurred to me um, when I saw how the neighbors started supporting one another. No, so every morning became like, that brief 10 minutes that people met on the road was like, I have two papayas today, and I have drumsticks, I have this, and everyone is sharing, and that's how the entire rural
As if the
economy was.
community is getting recreated in the process of isolation. So that's
True.
interesting.
It's really not that people this thing, people found ways to connect
Mhm.
and reconnect, connect and reconnect. And then it occurred to me, this is the process that needs at a larger level also, because it's really the question of redistribution and distribution. And
Mm.
it's not really that out there is less, but it's just
Mm.
that few of us seem to have either access to it or can afford these little more than others can. So that's what I really.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
as you say that, it also seems like how do we uh, ration our privilege in a way and maybe put it to good use where we can.
True.
As you describe what you're doing, that there's also a lot that seems to come up about the relationship with food, rather the lack of it for an average, at least urban person like me, where most times I don't quite know where the food that I buy comes from. There's really very little connection with the land and what we do to the land in order to
Hmm.
make it produce food, and the inherent violence in production, therefore, in the idea of production. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts around our current relationship with food as humanity, and what does it need to be going forward?
So I wouldn't really, I mean, though, I mean, I know that it began like that for me. The initial days of this lockdown was where I said, these urbanites, that's how much irritated I used to be. But then
Mhm.
when I started interacting even with the rural um, people and the growers, that sort of delinking from the natural resources of earth, what it can really give us, and how much more we are exploiting. So it's happening at various levels. So if I start from here, the farmers have gone into these huge monocrops. So the companies, I'll just take the example of corn because I went to this corn field and tons of corn, and I said, who is eating all this tons of corn? So they're
Mhm.
just told to produce that quantity. So they get the seeds, and this after 3 months, there is this company vehicle that comes and it picks up and goes. So these people don't know where this is going to
Mhm.
and why we are producing such huge quantities. But suddenly, when you looked at the quantities that some of the large farmers were sitting with, it was like 13,000 tons of gold, you know, and pumpkins, which were like 20,000 tons. Somebody is sitting with pumpkins, and then another grapes. And I'm like, what are you producing this much amount for? And so there seemed a dissonance, and the way then you are. One is exploitation and overburdening the earth and all of the resources, whether it's the water resource and Karnataka and in and around Bangalore. In fact, the water table has gone down so much. I mean, these days people have dug bore wells to up to 1,500 feet and they have not got water, which meant that we are taking so much more than
Yeah.
what the earth can offer, and we seem to be not realizing it. So that was one realization, and as they started having these conversation, they moved away from that doing this multi-cropping and then growing several stuff and then using. See here, Karnataka, the livestock and the dairy farming is part of the agriculture, so they have access to the manure, which can be organically used, and then the produce can be grown. But somehow
Mhm.
they've moved into the pesticides because that gives much larger produce. So all of those conversations started coming up. How do we? So that is one part of here, that entire delinking from resources that has happened. What do we need to do? And then these farmers saying, I have the land, but my family does not have vegetables to eat because I've gone and grown
Mhm.
only the corn or only something else. But I don't
Yeah.
have, had I grown ragi, had I grown rice for my, that is how the earlier system was, that, you grew first for the family, and whatever was more is what you sold. And from there, so there is no subsistence there is no self-sufficiency there. And moving into the people who are buying the food, one is we have lost this whole sense of what food to eat, when, what is local, what is seasonal. So we
Mhm.
want um, all kinds of things all kinds of the time, and there is this sense of I need it now. Like even when we went to sell in these gated communities, we taken one variety of mangoes, and there was
Mhm.
that whole thing of no, you should have got at least 5 varieties. Then I would have had a choice. And I'm trying to tell them, listen, this is what is available right now. That, it's not a question of because you can afford it, the choice will be presented to you. But how about looking at food as something that is available as and when, and the way it is grown, and then going along with it. So we seem to be eating so much of food that is not part of the local diet, not needed for a particular kind of region. And we are
Mhm.
growing not seasonally, but some of the things across the year, which again, is not good in terms of health and nutrition. So there is a dissonance there also, of
Yeah,
even in that, uh, and the pricing also, though it was much lower because so many levels of middlemen were taken away. So it was more of picking from the farmer and adding a little bit to the transport, and then whoever was taking it on behalf of them was taking a little bit of just for the time that they were putting in. But even then, people had this thing of how much did you really put your, buy it from the farmer? So you shouldn't be selling us more than that cost. And we were like, yeah, what about all the other time and energy that somebody's time and energy is going into? So
yeah,
somehow this whole sense of I have access to everything, and then it should be given to me as and when I require it and the way I want it. So we
yeah,
had people even saying how should it be packaged and brought to them and presented to them, given to them, and all of that, where it was so difficult to just get these passes, go there and give it and come back. So I think there is dissonance at various level. It's across. So there is
yeah.
no, for me, a difference between urban, rural, and all of that. As human beings, like you said, we seem
Mhm.
to have a very abusive relationship with food, is what I would like to
Yeah.
say. Uh,
But at Exult, of course, a lot of our work is around conscious capitalism, and increasingly we've been speaking to our clients and other stakeholders around saying how important it is to also, activate the other wing, so to say, in terms of conscious consumerism. In that, unless the consumer is conscious, organizations will keep supplying what is demanded without quite investigating into the reality of the need and the essence of the need. So then sustainability becomes really about survival of the system as it is, rather than sustainability of the planet and of all of us put together. So yeah, so a lot of what you're sharing is also perhaps the idea of privilege being abused by consumers. And ironically, it also seems like in a very mainstream manner of using the word privilege, that the lesser privilege one has, the closer one is to the land and to locally grown unprocessed food, and the more privileged one is, that linkage somehow gets lost, and that there's more access and consumption of processed food, which sometimes we never know where it comes from and how it's produced and how it's processed. So there's an irony built into the system as we know it.
Yeah, I mean, the little disagreement that I have there is calling this particular current system as sustainable. I mean, for me, the more and more I am getting into it, I can only see it breaking down. It's like, for me, a matter of the time before some of us have seen it, and a matter
Mm.
of time before all of us experience it. That
Hmm.
it is still a stage where we still think that this is going to get over soon, and after that we'll go back to our previous way of living, and that's,
Mm.
I know, and it's going to continue, but not
Mm.
really looking at the system where the incomes are going to come down at all levels. Because I've been seeing reports where companies are asking employees to take salary cuts, and a whole lot of jobs are going to go out of the market because they don't make any more sense in
Yeah.
the current scenario. So in that sense, the affordability is going to come down.
Mm.
And there is a change behavior in the production now. See, they have to make those quick changes because for surviving, they can't go back to this old way of producing in large quantities, and they are going to change their behaviors, which means that unless every part of the system then goes along, then it's
Yeah.
only for me it's a lot of breaking down. So I don't think that there's any sustainability. It's just that we refuse to accept it and
Mm.
somehow still would want to believe that there is a way that we
Yeah.
will get around it. And even for me, the one of the conversation of what is normal has been quite interesting
Yeah.
during this entire period, no, of is isolation normal, or is being together with a lot of people normal,
Mm.
or and I've been looking at the village, and then that is how most of the time villages are. It's not that every day people are meeting each other. At the
Mm.
most, they're greeting each other as they're passing by to go to their fields or doing
Mm.
something else, and all of that. And it's
Yeah.
only perhaps during these village festivals or a marriage or something like that
Mm.
where there is that gathering that happens. But
Mm.
otherwise, the way the village life is set up is a whole lot of the times you are into your own what you need to do, and you are in
Mm.
that.
Mm.
So even to define what is normal, no, has been for me quite amusing. So what is it that we are calling normal for ourselves? And I mean, it has been, people have defined it as minutely as I need to eat that samosa, that once a week from that chat person, which is a normal for my life.
Yeah.
Through the third week, people started missing their chat wala, their samosa person, and
Mm.
a whole lot of other things. So it is also this questioning that we have to do, no, when we say this is normal or this is the system.
Mm.
For me, is it really so?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we've held for far too long a very warped definition of normal, whatever that means, and very importantly of sustainability. That uh, for way too long we've somehow married sustainability to the idea of scale, and in a very delusional way believed that the only way to be sustainable is to scale up. And the kind of monstrosities we've created with the traditional idea of scale has been quite devastating as we see it while the systems collapse. And and so more and more as we go along in the last couple of years, even with a lot of our clients, our sensing has been that we really need to relook at the idea of scale, in that perhaps the way forward might be to look at a lot of micro economies collaborating with each other, of course, but really self-contained in many ways, and growing the scale, not so much scaling up the economies themselves, not so much expanding them, but expanding the cooperation and the collaboration between these micro economies. That seems like a sustainable way forward, in a way that sustainable includes the planet, the other life forms, or the other resources that we are provided with, and not just sustainability, which is a veiled term for profitability.
Yeah. Since you bring that up, yeah, one is the whole conversation around scaling up. The other is also, see, the other conversation that has come up during this time is of essential.
Mm.
What is essential to each of our lives? No? And I feel what is essentially can be as minimal as 3 meals a day, and uh, it's perhaps the public transport, it's perhaps so many things which is just about what we need for our living. And once I think that essential gets defined, automatically these local economies are going to operate. Then there is no more this whole amassing. No? See, even this wanting to sell more and more on the part of the farmers is really that there is this world that has insatiable resources or money,
Mm.
which now with either media or with transport, I have access to. So I want to go on accumulating that. But it is real, no, the people aren't really looking at, or the way we stack our fridges. That,
Mm.
it again comes from there of how much every time we pick up a particular thing
Mm.
um, uh, from the market, are we saying, do I really need it?
Yeah.
That, do I really want it? Or is
Mm.
it just that, it looks nice and then perhaps I will keep it for another day? So,
Mm.
so I think this whole idea of essential also is something that we need to get into. And
Mm.
like today, it occurred to me, uh, each one of us need to be sustainable and self-sufficient.
Mm.
Where I feel, see, every apartment, you need about 5 big pots where you can grow your basic chilies and tomatoes and coriander and perhaps one or two vegetables in this thing. So each
Mm.
one of us need to get into this whole way of living where we know that we can create and we can produce ourselves. Otherwise, I think a large section of us have become buyers and we
Mm.
really do not know what creating means. So I think that is something, that is the idea of sustainability, essential, and microeconomies. And we did here in Bangalore some of these apartment complexes where they have done this composting, wet waste composting in their apartment complexes, and
Mm.
have promoted, because that manure goes back into each house, and they have
Mm.
started growing there. And they have said this lockdown period has been different, and they appreciate the effort that they have put into
Mm.
that. So I feel even that needs to happen, including in our slums, because I often hear in this entire nutrition, health and nutrition work, you're going to a poor household and telling them to eat this, eat that, and where is the money, and all of that. So your solutions for their malnutrition is unfounded and all of that. But I really feel that even if you are in a slum, there is that little patch of land. You just need to put that one papaya tree, one drumstick plant. It doesn't take much space. You
Mm.
still have, that much this thing, and you still can keep these 5 pots. But it really is about our this disconnect of somebody produces. There's disconnect of this, there are people who produce and there are people who
Mm.
uh, consume.
Yeah.
But we
And
have to
there's
get
so
into
much
this, that
more
I produce
spoken
and I
about
consume.
consumer rights, right? There's so much
Yeah,
more conversation around the consumer and the rights of the consumer. We barely talk about the producer or identify with ourselves as
ourselves as the
producers.
producer, no? So so I feel that, so a whole lot of this, I mean, that's where when I started my conversation, I said this whole laboring that we have to learn to do,
Mm.
get back to,
Yeah.
of knowing that, that there is so much that each one of us can do,
Mm.
um, as part of beyond our livelihoods or beyond earning that income.
Mm.
But it's really about being able to do, and for me, that is leadership.
Yeah.
That, um, lead each of our lives in a way that is in consonance with Earth's resources,
Mm.
where we know that others are dependent on those resources, and where we don't take more than what we need. So it's really a leadership, unlike the traditional leadership, again, which is defined as one person or a group of people who are, leading us and who are our saviors. But it's really the because that's another thing, that constant criticism of government is not doing this, they should have done that, they should, have worked this way. Yes, I mean, they are our representatives, and they should be in more in terms of having that rules and regulations and having that judicial power to be able to make policies and all of that, I agree. But
Mm.
then for me, this whole thing of sitting helpless, and
Mm.
from there saying that, we need to be saved and we're not being saved, is
Mm.
really the pits of dependency. So the way forward is really where each one of us can link to this larger
Yeah.
processes, and we know that the way the world will be is dependent on the way we lead our lives. So for me, the convergence that you're talking about is
Mm-hmm.
this is the convergence that has to happen within, where I
Mm-hmm.
we don't feel helpless, we don't have resources.
Hmm.
So it's just this
Yeah, I guess
linkage.
that calls for a lot of redefinition, right? Including the redefinition of labor and the idea of labor. That so much of our effort in the last century, at least, has been about reducing labor and labeling it as bad and menial and uh, not essential in a way. And for us to be able to find joy in labor is perhaps, in a way, a healing process that all of us need to embark on.
Yeah.
Okay. One final question before we close is around. So the series, of course, is around the idea of emergence around the theme of leadership. And uh, how do you see leadership emerging through you in the current times?
Okay. Uh, See, for me, it has been um innovating myself. What I know, and I suddenly realized that even when you said that you need to do this interview, I'm like, I can write this down to you, and you can go speak about it wherever you want to. Why do I need to do this interview with you? And you held on and said that no, you are coming. And then what occurred to me is that the entire linkages that I perhaps have built over these number of years, where it has put me in a position where I can see, I don't have qualms about either of the world or multiple worlds that seem to be divided right now, but somehow I seem to be moving through all of these worlds, sometimes very seamlessly, like, and without reservations, without judgments, but really to say that, how do I understand each of these worlds and what is happening there? And it really comes down to a whole lot of insecurities and fears and anxieties in each of these worlds that is making people, behave and make choices in a particular way. And so it's really the conversations that I want to start having in different worlds, and perhaps make them see that it's not so much that we are divided in our realities. It's pretty much the same reality that all of us face, but in different forms, of course. And therefore, how can we have this shared living or shared perspective, shared economy, where we are able to have, share these conversations and exchanges. And I really see my role that has emerged like that from these, so from getting irritated with so many people and all their views and opinions and everything, I seem to have reached a point of listening to say that, what is it really that you're trying to say, and where this is coming from. And I feel a whole lot of us will have to hold that role in the coming days, uh, where we are able to offer this space for different people to come on board, and nobody denied a space of not being heard or not being listened to,
Yeah.
and then working a way through. So that's where I really feel I'm placed right now. It might change in 6 months, but currently, at least, that is the space that I'm there in so many ways. And it has helped even when I've looked at, if you look at it even from a mental health perspective, no? So it's what people really need at this stage is when they're grappling with accepting this new reality, really help them hold on to it and move towards it. And I'm not saying showing the way, I'm just saying that, by letting them know that, we're all in the same boat, let it not sink, and we have a way of paddling it
Yeah.
along. So I mean, that's the metaphor that really comes to my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, in many ways, that's also the metaphor of these conversations of the Emergent Leadership Series. That we're looking at, we're being inspired by the idea of the Vesica Pisces, the symbol where two circles intersect,
Hmm.
and ultimately it's not about two circles, right? Each intersection meets another circle, and thus there's that
Yeah.
flower of life, and all of those coexist, and it's about us finding our node in those circles and looking at where is my work in the given moment. And I love what you said about, this is the leadership right now, and you don't know what it's going to be maybe a few months from now. And yeah, we seem to be being called to operate more and more from presence, which requires us to really sense into the reality, to not deny it, but really to look at it in the face, to be disturbed, to have the courage to be disturbed by reality, so as to
Mm.
be able to respond to it, instead of denial and absencing and cocooning ourselves from it. So that seems to be the call of the times. So this was lovely, Sri. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, viewers. If you have questions for Sri or for me, please do post it on the Facebook timeline. We'll be happy to respond to you going forward as well. And if you are, or if you know of any inspirational leaders that are emerging in the current times, do reach out to us, and we'd love to bring them into this conversation. So thank you for joining us, and have a safe and healthy time ahead.
Thank you.